It is 5:16. This is the Public Safety, Beer, and Regulated Beverages Committee. It's Tuesday, July 2nd, 2019. We are in Committee Room 3. I detect we have a quorum. We have two things up on the agenda tonight. One of them includes two substitutes and an amendment, and is Bill 2019-1658, Councilmans Elrod and O'Connell. They are in Public Works Committee right now, so we are going to hold off on that one. We will address Bill 2019-1707, Glover, Bednay, and others. Amends the Metro Code of Laws to prohibit powered or self-powered scooters as shared urban mobility devices within the area of the Metro government of Nashville and Davidson County. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Councilman Glover?
Just very briefly, I will leave it up to the committee on how you guys want to do this. I know there's another bill, and I kind of had assumed that we would be kind of looking at both of them together. And so if the other one is deferred, fine, on mine. If it's not deferred, I would like mine to go ahead and go to the floor tonight. And so with that, obviously it's two different approaches. This one bans completely the scooters, and the other does not. So whatever the wish of the council is where we're going to land. But I don't want to kill one in committee and the other one get on the floor. I think if we're going to do one of them on the floor, they both need to get on the floor.
Thank you, Councilman. I completely agree with you. So with that said, do we have a motion to approve?
Well, I want to ask a question first.
Shoot.
What happened in Public Works? Was it in Public Works?
I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
they're
Well, I know they're doing it, but I didn't know if his was one that had gotten through.
No, because mine, traffic and parking is the only other one it's in.
Okay.
And it's next at 5:30.
Okay, so but I just want to see what your intentions are. They're pretty clear now about it's either going to be both or none, right?
Kind of where I am, yeah. And so, but I will tell you this, that if the decision is made, and this is why I was asking if Mr. Jameson or Hannah was here to find out if you in fact do convene and then reconvene at 5:45, if you wanted to postpone and wait on this particular vote, it's however you want to do it, Mr. Chair. But the only thing I would ask is that if one of the bills goes through, then they both go through and they get on the floor. I think that's what needs to happen.
Can you make a motion like that?
So
Well,
the other
no, we
response is
would
not
just
here, right?
we would do nothing right now and reconvene at 5:45.
Agree.
And that is what I would prefer to do.
I would
Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah, because yours is an amendment to the bill.
No, mine, no.
You have your own separate one?
Mine is my own separate one.
I'm still not seeing why we don't take action on his.
Because
You're
he wants it
you're
to
welcome
track
to if
with
you
the other
like.
one. I think if I hear him correctly, Mr. Glover is saying that without the other one, he's not gonna, you don't want yours to go through without the other one, correct?
No, I'm fine if mine goes through without the other one, but I just think that if one of them gets approved, they both need to get on approved and on the floor.
So
to
your
talk
concern,
about.
we can, I think we can just take a vote, because I don't know that listening to the other one, I'm really trying to make sure I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that listening to one would still change.
Well,
how
then
we
I'm going
vote
to
on
ask you.
yours.
I'm going to ask you then to support my bill
Okay,
right
I think
now,
that's
and let's bring it on to the floor, and let's see where we are. And then, if we need to on the floor, if a deferral's in line, then we'll look at that. The only thing I don't want to do is run out of time in this term and not deal with this. This has to be dealt with.
You can defer it from the floor tonight.
I can. That's correct. Yep. All right. So it's up to you, Mr. Chair, however you want to do
Yeah,
it.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but for the viewing audience, I think what Councilman Glover is asking for here is if we consider one and send it to the council chambers for discussion, that we do so with his as well.
Right.
That's correct.
Let's do it.
Yeah, which has no bearing on whether the other bill
That's right.
is here or not. I think we can convolute it, that's fine.
That's right.
Yeah,
But if that's the way,
but however we
So
vote, we're gonna vote,
the
right?
question that we have to ask and answer right now is do we want to vote on this right now, or do we want to wait until we reconvene at 5:45 and listen to the other ordinance and vote on them both?
I make
at
a
that
motion
time?
that we reconvene. If we're going to reconvene at 5:45, we might as well hear them both at the same time.
That's how I feel as well.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
So, Public Safety Beer and Regulated Beverages is now adjourned until 5:45. We will reconvene at that time. Thank you.
And just so they can track.
Safety Beer and Regulated Beverages Committee, it is Tuesday, July 2nd, 2019. We are in Committee Room 3. We adjourned 30 minutes ago to wait for a sponsor who is currently presenting to the Public Works Committee, and we are at this second still waiting on him.
I did make eye contact with him. He's different.
And with that said,
So, hey y'all.
good. I thought Elrod was coming in.
He was.
Okay.
He gave me the nod and started standing up and working. The crowd, getting through that crowd, it ain't easy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the way committees work sometimes. Every now and again, there's something that requires a lot of conversation, and we have committee meetings back to back to back to back to back, and when they get pushed, and we're now at the back end of that push.
Glover needs to be in here too as well.
But he's right there.
Okay, we got Glover, let me just,
It's gonna be right outside the door, so you don't even need to see it inside. I think it must be because it's outside of the hallway. You want to make sure you or something, you don't mind. So it must be just outside.
they made him stay so he could take a vote. So he's standing by the door to vote, but he is taking a
Okay.
vote. Elrod.
Where's Glover Crowd? Is he in there defending his bill?
Oh, they will.
Glover's in the hall, I believe.
You didn't have to go to Public Works. Sometimes Traffic and Parking Committee.
Everything's pushed back because of that.
It was at 5:30, but I doubt it happened yet.
Who's the chair of that?
Traffic and parking.
Larry Hager.
Hagar.
Well, he'll move as fast as he can, usually.
There's Elrod.
There you go.
Grab Glover,
All right.
too. Glover.
Go. Thanks, sir.
Okay, we are back with the program again. Thank you, Councilman Elrod. Appreciate you taking the time to come out and speak to our committee.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for your patience.
We are on Bill 2019-1658, Councilman Elrod and O'Connell amends the Metro Code of Laws regarding shared urban mobility devices. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Councilman Elrod, I believe you have a substitute.
Yes, sir. Essentially what the substitute would do is it would put in place, upon passage, it would remove scooters, SUMDs, from the streets for 60 days. And upon the end of that 60 days, there would have to be a RFP process whereby Metro can come to an agreement with up to 3 companies for them to potentially come back to the streets and to the sidewalks, and allows the TLC to come up with all the regulation and fees to pay for that RFP, including enforcement and all that kind of thing. So I would ask that you approve the first substitute.
Questions?
How did it do in?
I apologize. Both of them received favorable recommendations from the Public Works Committee. The first substitute and the second one.
Well, Councilman, I do have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Am I reading this correctly, and you're leaving this to the Transportation Licensing Commission to basically establish the limitation on the number of permitted users, or operators, excuse me, the limits on the numbers of SUMDs, et cetera, et cetera?
Up to a point, they can only have up to 3 providers. They can't have any more than that. Currently, we have 7 today.
But basically, everything here is left up to
Yes,
the
and this
licensing
is,
commission.
a body that meets monthly. They have public comment at every meeting, so they would be able to come up with a framework. I think one of the most important things is that they would be able to set the fees that would allow them to hire more staff, because I think the biggest thing that we've had during this current pilot project is not enough enforcement and not enough dedicated Metro staff to make the pilot project work and to make the regulating of scooters work. So this would allow that to be put in place, at least if they do it correctly. But I don't think that, of us getting into the weeds of an RFP necessarily needs to be written by the council. I think that needs to be, written by someone, a body like the TLC, at least, for right now.
Yeah, is the enforcement still gonna be left up to an understaffed police department?
No, sir. At least if the TLC, and this is what I would recommend, and I think if we do it this way, basically what they'll be hearing from the council is make the companies pay for the enforcement. Have a fee structure in place, whether it's an upfront fee, a per trip charge, hey, it costs us X this month, so if there's 3 companies, we'll divide that by 3, and each of you have to pay this. That will be set out in the RFP process. So, it's right now it's left up to, the police department, Billy Fields, or somebody taking a picture, sending it into Hub. This would allow, I think, a lot more, flexible enforcement. By flexible, I mean the process by which it's done. Instead of now, it's kind of whoever wants to do it does it. Well, no one wants to do it, so we need to, I think, hire some actual staff to do it. But I don't think that needs to come from other parts of metro government that already need it funding. So this would require or allow the TLC to make the companies fully pay for it.
But any
Aren't we
accident or injury has to be worked with the police department.
Yeah. Yes.
Are we setting up a scenario where the foxes guard the hen house?
I would not. No, the TLC would be in charge of it. I mean, they're appointed, they're nominated by the mayor, confirmed by us. And I didn't watch the entire hearing, but just talking to some of the people that were at the hearing this past month, these aren't folks that are totally enamored with scooters. So they're not by any means getting, a rubber stamp that's going to be in charge of them.
And this is my least favorite question, but is the state going to usurp us on this?
I wouldn't presume to know what the legislature's going to do on anything. But I think I've talked to, I think operators may have talked to other cities. I've talked to people in Franklin about it. This is something that is on the radar everywhere, and what we're pursuing now was not an option necessarily, a year ago, as we're feeling our way out through this. And to legislate it, I think at the state level would be pretty heavy-handed, where we haven't figured out on the local level yet. I think if we completely ban them and don't allow them in Nashville, I think we are inviting state preemption. But I think as long as we're working with operators and trying to make scooters work, I would imagine that that would be fine. But I think it also goes back to if we can't make it work, then they're not going to want it in their communities either. But I think we need to give it a chance to work here now.
And why 60 days?
Because at least, it could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. For me, these, with all the traffic congestion that we have as a city, we need to have as many mobility options as possible if we can make them work. And I'm hoping that if we completely revamp it as an RFP process, allows the company, or requires the companies to pay for enforcement, greatly reduces the number of scooters, and creates more of a partnership between the companies and Metro, that we can make it work. And people rely on this to get to meetings, to get to work, to get back and forth to the bus. And so I don't want this to completely go off the table for a long time for those folks. And also, this has been considered a ban. To me, it's basically a pause in it. And I don't want people to get the impression that they're completely going away, because that's not my intent necessarily right now. I think we can try to do some more things to try to make them work. And I want that to be done as quickly as possible.
Thanks.
My concern, even with the original, has been enforcement. I mean, obviously, the enforcement with the police isn't working, and I understand that because they don't, they're so understaffed. But I mean, I don't really see what innovative ideas do these other cities have about enforcing the rules and regulations.
Is Billy in here? Mr. Fields may have a better idea of that. I'll let the operator speak to it. But I think there's, some things we can do is, like, corrals are working. I think some requirements on the operators of go slow zones, no parking areas, which can be done electronically through, GPS and that kind of thing. Hiring, staff, or, folks to just, if you see a scooter that's knocked down or blocking a sidewalk, you pick it up and put it where it's supposed to go. If you get a complaint, you have somebody that goes out and does it, and you charge the company, or you make the companies go and do it. And, you know, I don't necessarily think we need a scooter with a blue light on it chasing people down.
No.
But, you know, I think right now, there's no culture of enforcement in the city. And
Right.
people know that if you're riding a scooter. But, you know, just like myself, I speed at times, but I know that, you know, there's not a police officer on every street doing radar, but I know there's that potential, and that's one of the things that helps keep me in check as far as speeding. And I think if people that are riding scooters in Nashville know there's a potential they could, you know, get a ticket or, you know, have some kind of fine, they're going to start to act and use them better. But right now, there's nothing in place whatsoever.
So what concerns me is that I think, you know, obviously downtown this is an issue. It's not an issue in my district. I mean, the nation's, it just doesn't, we don't have issues with scooters. So it seems almost prohibitive to do this ubiquitously. Is there a way that you could only do it in certain districts?
To do what?
Well,
To
I
do
guess-
well, I would say probably not, because if you just, you know, ban, you know, how do we ban them in just your, I mean, you could put a geofence around your district, but, so I guess you're for building the wall.
the flood wall?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, whatever kind of wall.
Yeah, that wall too.
But, you know, people are going to want to ride them around town, and if we don't, you know, have some targeted no parking areas, you know, I think we'll create a patchwork, and you know, it's just not practical, because, you know, they may not allow scooters to be parked in your district in the morning, but in the afternoon, they may want to come to a restaurant or something in your district, so they're going to go other places.
Kind of like panhandling.
A couple of months ago, Vanderbilt started a test with, I think it was every scooter company, that basically geofenced the quad at Vanderbilt and reduced their speed from 15 miles an hour to a maximum of 5. Anybody know how that's working out? Because I haven't heard. And I'll take anybody from the gallery on this one.
We're one of the companies involved in that. My understanding is it's working well. We don't hear any complaints, and Vanderbilt has been very supportive of their relationship with us, and are eager to continue to working with us in the future, and excited to have scooters when students come back in office.
Same for mine.
Good to know.
Well, the only problem, you're talking about 6 months. You know it takes that long for this government to wash your hands. Now, 6 months, just.
Well, it's 60 days.
60 days. Okay,
Might get a finger wet.
make it a finger wheel. No soap.
Any other questions?
Well, we'll just say, giving us at least some credit, is we passed the original regulations in August. We're completely revamping them less than a year, you know, less than a year later. That's pretty fast for government time, I would say. So we're trying to respond to it, yeah.
So, with this being such a controversial issue, and the fact that we have 3 completely separate ordinances here to
Well, it
consider.
would just be 2, just the first substitute and then the second one.
Well, and Councilman Glover's.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Chairman,
So
sorry.
what I'd like to do is, let's vote on these as they come to us, which this is the first one. Let's take a vote on this one, then we'll take a vote on Councilman Pulley's, and then we'll take a vote on Councilman Glover's.
Fair enough.
And as we said in the earlier meeting, and as Councilman Glover so eloquently stated, I concur. I think it's important that all of these go to the council floor. I don't think any of this should be decided in committee. I think we should have an honest, ongoing debate on the floor, not just in second read tonight, but in third read in 2 weeks. I think it's too important, and I think there's way too many people involved in this particular issue to not do that.
Would
So,
it be out of order to make a motion just to move them all?
I don't think you can do
Sit
it.
here for-
not necessarily. It wouldn't be out of order, but if that's the case, then I'd like to hear from Councilman Pulley about his substitute.
We might as well hear them all at the
May as
same time.
well.
and then just make-
Kind of where I'm going. If we as a committee are in agreement that we're just going to kind of blanket vote on all this,
Mr.
Councilman.
Chair, just very quickly, can we have somebody check the traffic and parking? Because we're supposed to be over there right now as well, and I'm just trying to make sure that we're supposed to be.
Okay, with that said, are there any further questions for Mr. Glover? Because we did hear from him at 5:15.
No.
You're good? Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Councilman Pulley.
Thank you. So 3 of us Vercher, Davis, and myself, Anthony Davis, we have an amendment, well, not an amendment, but a substitute bill. And I think we all have maybe different reasons for doing this, but I'll tell you mine, and then I'll tell you what's in it. I have a concern about a 60 or a 90 or a 180-day ban because the message that it sends to the community is a little bit confusing. If you look at the headline of the Green Hills News, it says Mayor bans scooters. That's not what he really did. But if you do this, then the message is sent to the community that we ban scooters, and you can say, like to Councilman Pardew's point, yeah, it says 60 days, but how long is the RFP process going to take?
Right.
So that could take a little while longer. Now we're in January, and now the community has gotten used to no scooters, and now we're going to bring them back again. And I just don't think that's a healthy way for us to go about doing this. And we committed to a pilot project for a year, and I want to see it through. Another issue we have is a lot of people think that tourists are the only people who use these scooters. And I've got constituents that use them for transportation. You know, we've lost money in the MTA's budget this year. And so I think it's discouraging to take another form of multimodal transportation where, we legitimately have people who live in Nashville using these to get back and forth to work or to get back and forth to some other form of transportation, which takes vehicles off the street. So I have some concerns about it from that perspective. My main concerns about scooters in general are the same ones that everybody else has: enforcement and the scooters that are blocking the sidewalks, because we don't want, it's easy for me to pick them up, but there's a lot of people where it's not. People have wheelchairs, and so those are big concerns.
People on crutches.
Sure, yeah, people like you on crutches for a long period of time. So, the things that we put in here are the operators have been gracious enough to comply with some pretty strict measures. So we immediately, if this is passed, reduce the complement, cut it in half. All the operators are going to cut their complement in half. We create mandatory slow zones in the high traffic tourist areas. Limit hours of operation to maximum 10 p.m. on the weekdays and 11 p.m. on the weekends. And the operators are committed to put boots on the ground. To your point about enforcement, legally it's still in the hands of the police department. However, what they're doing here is they're putting 2 employees per 100 scooters to go around and rebalance the fleet and make sure that these things are picked up. In addition, we've got helmet promotional activities where I believe a number of the scooter operators are giving away helmets at strategic spots in the downtown area, hotels, so that they can encourage helmet use. There's also some signage requirements here that installed by the TLC up to and the operators are paying up to a maximum of $10,000 on that. So that saves us a little bit of money, the signage for the no operation on the sidewalk and things of this nature. They also have a 120-minute maximum response time for complaints, with ADA complaints even further reduced from that, with a goal at 15 minutes for the ADA compliance and a maximum of 30 minutes for handling of those complaints. So our attitude is, or at least my attitude is, let's put this in place. I think it goes to, I believe the language puts it to RFP within 100 days. I think that's what the legislation says. Is that not right? And
Yes.
Let's take a look at the data, see what we get. We're not limiting our modes of transportation. We don't send the wrong message to the public, and if we can't fix this problem, then we can revisit it at the end of the time period.
Questions?
Hold on. Just thinking through.
I do have a couple questions.
I think it's good. Make it easy. I don't know if I'm that good.
Let me see here. When you talk about the TLCs directed to conduct a process with RFP process within 100 days, select a maximum of up to 3 operators, and you're saying here initially allow each selected operator a minimum of 500 units in the fleet?
That's what minimum. Well, I guess we'll go back to that during the RFP process. And
Yeah, my question would be, what's the maximum? If we're gonna set a lower limit,
well,
is there an upper limit?
Limit now, but I guess we leave that up to the TLC.
Okay. Second question is
Roughly how many are on the strip? Oh, sorry, forgive me, sorry.
10 million.
4,100.
4,100 on the street right now?
Wow.
On the street now.
La-
So you're cutting that to 2.
James Weaver Waller, representing Lime. Last Friday, there were 4,102 units on the street. Lime and Bird voluntarily took 500 each off the street this weekend. So today, Tuesday, there are 3,102 units authorized or out on the street. If you happen to walk in downtown Nashville today, you can really tell the difference. This bill would cut the fleet from 4,102 down to 2,005. Representative Councilman Pulley's bill. It's been a long day, folks.
And there, how many companies? I hear 7?
They're currently 7, and the RFP would take it down to 3. Well, a maximum of 3. TLC might pick 1. That's what the bill gives them. His substitute allows them to select up to 3. Could be 1, could be 2, could be 3.
Now, how in the hell are we gonna pick the 3 that gets jobs?
It's up to the
Mr. Reed?
RFP.
Sure.
You have to go.
I mean, this is where a lot of cities are moving right now. I think the experience that Nashville's had when we were talking about this last August and we passed it in August of last year, there were a couple folks at the table that were doing this, that were offering scooters. Lime and Bird launched in September. In the following months, we've now had up to 7 providers, with one new company coming in about 3 months ago with another 500 scooters. And so I think what you see is they're all fighting over precious turf and customers and market share, and we have the resulting situation on the street. We think that the way that cities ought to be thinking about this is who is going to dedicate the most resources, both manpower, both the latest technology to address the issues that we've been discussing in here. So those are the things that will be considered in the RFP. Experience, right? You don't want someone this is their first rodeo. And quite frankly, I think the TLC has now had the experience of dealing with 7 providers, albeit for a short time, but they've learned a lot of lessons. We've all learned a lot of lessons in that time. So I think all of those things will be considered, and the company that makes the best proposal will be chosen.
Councilman, address the hotline issue. Is this a third party, or is this going to become part of TLC or codes or public works, or how are you envisioning this?
I'm going to kick this to the operators who are going to be working the hotline and let them explain it.
The Councilman Pulley's legislation requires an independent, separate for the ADA hotline compliance. Currently, there's a 2-hour response time requirement, which works well for, there's a scooter parked against my building, could you get somebody to come pick it up? But if you're in crutches or in a wheelchair, 2 hours is
Unconscionable.
unconscionable, and frankly, 2 minutes is too long. But
Yeah, 15 minutes may be unconscionable.
so the bill sets up a 30-minute hotline that the providers, the current providers, would put in place during this interim period, and that the provider selected in the RFP would put in place and fund to provide some sort of a to-be-determined way for an ADA complaint to bypass everything, like the old Batman.
Yeah, it's the bat phone.
The thing in the sky.
Yeah.
That kind of the functional technological equivalent of that bat light in the sky, and a requirement to get there in 30 minutes.
Or 15.
Or whatever the council puts in, yes, sir. It currently says 30, because it's not 2 hours is no one with an ounce of heart would think that 2 hours is appropriate for ADA type complaints.
So if the calls are going to you, how do we know that you're following through with it? Who's doing the compliance part of that?
So we currently or require, we're currently getting a lot of complaints through 211?
311.
311? The hub.
The hub.
And of course, that system keeps, the call comes in, it's logged in, you know.
We all get an email.
We all get an email, we go respond, we respond back because they're grading our paper, so to speak, on response times. This would be something, again, to differentiate from, there's a scooter parked against my building and I don't like it.
Yeah.
That this is the functional equivalent of a 911. This is do it and do it now. It needs to go to all of us. And if it's his scooter that's causing the problem, my guys need to fix it. The closest person to the problem needs to fix it.
You would work in tandem.
We would.
Yes.
The idea is that we would either retain somebody and pay them jointly, or we would share the responsibility. But the idea is if it's an ADA problem, it's all our problem.
Sure.
That's the concept behind that provision in Councilman Pulley's bill.
And
So the legislation makes them do it. It doesn't mandate the particulars and the technicalities of how. And I think what our desire is to take a look throughout this time period, see how it's working, and we can always tweak it. Because that 30-minute window for ADAs, I don't really know that that's going to be a great thing if 30 minutes is what it takes to get a scooter out of the way of a guy in a wheelchair. So,
How many ADA, how many of those complaints have we received, like in the last
I
month?
mean, that's what we need to do is lean.
And I think that's part and parcel of the problem. While Hub Nashville is a wonderful repository for every customer in Nashville to report problems, from potholes to trees down to scooters in the sidewalk, it's very hard when you're into Hub Nashville to flag something immediately.
Well, and they're not
almost
manned
impossible.
24/7.
And they're not manned 24/7, that's exactly right.
And
So,
They're gone.
That's right.
so might I suggest
Yes, that's why it's a separate review.
that however this gets set up, it's a third-party entity that is responsible and funded by you all, by the operators, but also reports to Hub Nashville simultaneously, so that there's
A record.
a double-sided transparency. Does that make sense?
Sure, but I just think Hub Nashville has so much on it right now anyway. I think adding more.
No, it would be nothing more than a reporting side for Hub Nashville, and the operators would have to deal with it.
It'll have to be something different.
Do you,
I don't know your name.
Max Lucen from Lyft. On Thursday night, this issue came up at the TLC meeting, and they added that, or they were recommending, I believe, that if there was a violation and the city actually had to fix it immediately, which they should, that cost then be passed on to the operator.
So if the operator can't fix it within 15 minutes, the city has to come in and intervene.
Or if the city could do it right there.
Yeah.
If they happen to be right there, they could just go ahead and do it.
And you have to, when we're talking about ADA, obviously the Armageddon scenario is a wheelchair-bound person who can't get to where they're going. That's there. Nothing there but a scooter on a ramp. That's an ADA problem. And so it's while we're all focused on the individual on a crutch, or ADA is a little bit broader than that, and that's why the 30 or 15. That was the thinking behind that using that number.
gotcha.
Another item we're discussing on ADA within Lyft is having within the app. So if you go into the app, you tap on a button and you can report something instantly. It would be actually an ADA violation button, so you don't even have to type it. If you need to take a picture, you could. You immediately get a response confirming that you've sent that in, and it would go straight to the local operations team to sort out as well. So that's another channel for this.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, so as we've decided early on, we have 1658 with two substitutes, Mr. Pulley's and Mr. Elrod's. And we have 1707, which is Councilman Glover's ordinance. Glover's 1707 bans them completely. The first substitute, Elrod's substitute, to 1658 has a 60-day ban, RFP issued, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Councilman Pulley's basically says we're going to cut the fleet in half, we're going to issue RFP within 100 days, We're going to kind of move forward. There's a lot of specifics. I will commend you, Councilman, for being specific about certain things within this. Those are the three we are voting on collectively. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. All three pass. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Sweet Jesus. Enforcement.